All right, David, congratulations on receiving your first Emmy nomination for writing The Night Manager. It was one of 12 nominations that the limited series received in total. How did it feel when you got the news, not only that you had been nominated, but that the film itself had received so many nominations across the board, acting, directing, crafts?
It was wonderful. I mean, obviously I live in London, and sometimes it feels that the Emmys are very, very, very strongly an American affair. But they've become big news over here, particularly in recent years, I think. So it was a great excitement for us all. I think it's a show we spent obviously a lot of time making, and I think we're all very proud of it.
Well, yes, congratulations. So take us back to the beginning. How did you get involved with this?
So John le Carre's main, I suppose, production company, which is run by his sons, Simon and Stephen, approached me very simply, actually, just said, have you read this book? We're interested in adapting it for television. They'd managed to get the rights back. I think people had tried to turn it into a movie for many years and failed. I'd read it way back, but didn't remember it well, if I was to be honest. It was way back in the 90s. And I read it again, and immediately I knew it was something I really wanted to do. I've been a huge Le Carre fan since I was a kid, really. My dad and I used to watch Alec Guinness TV series of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy on the sofa together. So there was something of a lovely emotional quality to that. But I really knew I wanted to update it and change quite a few things that would work on screen better than the initial material might suggest. So I met him, basically, and this was the key thing. I met him in a pub, and we had a 2-hour conversation. And I was expecting it to be quite difficult, there were some of the ideas I had. And he's just the most incredibly alive collaborator, incredibly active. His brain's way ahead of your own. It was a very exciting experience. And as soon as that happened, I knew that we were on good ground.
Mm-hmm. So in the adaptation process, what were some things that you might have changed or added, or just talk about the process of adapting it from a book into a television series?
Sure. I mean, the main thing was the book was written in the 90s. What I knew I could trust was this extraordinary skeleton, this incredible emotional skeleton that the book had. Effectively, I always think of it almost like a love triangle, with Jonathan Pine in the middle, Richard Roper on one side, the Dark Angel, if you like, and Angela Burr, she became in the television series. It's a man in the book, as the Good Angel, wonderfully played by Olivia Colman. So that structure I kind of held to it. There was a touch of Faust to it. And I just, the guy that goes into the heart of darkness, and will he be sucked into the darkness, or will he maintain his moral compass? And I kind of kept very strongly to that all the way through. And I think sometimes drama can be both very complicated and unbelievably simple all at the same time. The plot, of course, has to be complex. It's all about arms dealing. There's a political conspiracy. One needs to keep the audience constantly gripped and excited. And I enjoy writing that stuff. But I think the bit that makes it a little bit different to perhaps your kind of down the line, well-plotted political thriller is just this strange, almost what I call metaphysical or existential quality to the character of Pine. Tom Hiddleston plays him beautifully. This strange man, I don't think even he knows who he is. We certainly don't. And therefore we're constantly unsure about which way he might go and which decision he might make. So that structure felt great. And then it was all about updating it to the present day. I wanted to move it away from the Latin American focus to an Arab focus, because that feels just so much more politically relevant now. There were also, therefore, other things I wanted to do as part of that update, most obviously changing the gender of Burr, the British intelligence officer who is Pine's handler. I think it was a thing we all felt, to be honest. It wasn't entirely me. It was just we all felt, it was my idea to change Burr. It was essentially a collective decision. We just wanted to bring more women into the role, into the roles of the intelligence establishment, because that has happened since 9/11 in Britain. I'm sure it's happened everywhere. So there were lots of changes. And then I suppose the biggest thing was the big shift. The final episode and a half of The Sticks are pretty much new material. There isn't much from the book in those, because the book goes very internal in a very specific way that simply wouldn't have worked as well in the dramatic form. I also knew by the time I was writing Six that I had Hugh, Laurie and Tom Hiddleston playing the lead two roles, and it was so clear to me that I had to engage in that very simple battle of two titans, if you like, and that's what that episode 6 had to be about.
Mm-hmm. So going off of that, obviously you have the overall arc of each 6 episodes, but talk about breaking it down into those episodes. I mean, what was that process like?
It was two different things. I think I knew immediately that I had a kind of circular structure in my head, which we would start in Egypt. We would go from Egypt into the very heart and soul of the Roper Empire. We would follow Pine in there, and we would then come back out again. The question being, will Pine come back unchanged or changed? Will he essentially, will he have brought into the world of darkness, or will he have maintained his soul? That never really changed in a strange way. And then, of course, the other thing is way more organic, which is, where does each episode quite end and begin, and how do you create interesting cliffhangers to keep audiences on from one week to the next, which is the technical side of writing, which is really important. And that was something I really enjoyed, and that was a collaborative effort with directors and with Susanne directing and with the producers. And but the sort of what I think of as the metaphysical structure, the spiritual journey of the man, I think that's what you have to hold on to always. Sometimes as a writer, when there's 100,000 pressures about, or we've got all sorts of things. From American programs have different lengths to British programs, as a very simple example, because of adverts. So there's all sorts of different weird things that seem very small, but are actually very important, which everyone has to consider. But sometimes you just have to keep a strong grip on the main emotional arc of your lead character, and keep that big idea strong and clear. And I think that's something that does sort of work for an audience, that you very much begin in Egypt, and the middle, if you like, of the drama is that, for me, is the moment that Pine steals into Roper's private study that no one goes to, which is incredibly simple and small. This little funny little monastic room on the island, an otherwise incredibly affluent house, but this actual room is tiny and very plain. And for me, that's the sort of eye of the hurricane of both the book and the TV drama. And I wanted to sort of take us right to there and then bring us right back out again. And that was the sort of structure I followed.
Mm-hmm. And one of the most extraordinary things about this too is just how much information is conveyed in each episode. And I mean, you're jumping back and forth in time in some instances, and jumping back and forth from one continent to another. So was that a challenge to write? Just saying, okay, I need to check back in with Olivia Colman, or I need to come back to Jonathan Pine or Richard Roper.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes you feel that thing almost rhythmically, like, sometimes, for example, it's very enjoyable to leave a certain story in suspense for 2 or 3 minutes. And so it's actually rather enjoyable. You go, oh, well, actually, that's good, because we can go somewhere else, and we'll leave the audience slightly hanging on, I'm sure, as to what's about to happen there. So sometimes you can actually, those things are actually not problems as much as opportunities, that they're kind of like slightly useful. The producers were always extremely clear that I didn't need to think about limiting myself in terms of geography. They wanted it to be expansive, and I think the cleverness of that and the cleverness of Suzanne's direction is that there's a sort of very stern intellectual element to the piece, but there's also a very expansive, generous, almost escapist quality to it. So that they were very encouraging about that. I never had any someone saying, well, you can't do this or you can't do that in terms of geography. But the time stuff is a mixture of I enjoyed doing that. That was fun, particularly in episode 2, playing a kind of game as to where we were. That was totally. Some of these things are just instinctive. They're not really thought through. You just feel, okay, this story is going to be best told if we go actually strangely first to Hugh Laurie at the beginning of episode 2, who is very lightly in episode 1. I mean, barely in it at all. Really, he just pops up at the end. So to surprise people and switch the point of view, do something that's not quite fully expected in a piece that is fundamentally following Pine most of the time. It's just occasionally to go against the grain on that creates a bit of energy and friction for an audience, which I think keeps them gripped.
Mm-hmm. So what then would you say was either the biggest challenge for you in writing this, or maybe the toughest scene that you had to write or sequence? What was the biggest challenge for you?
I think that's a good question. I think the toughest probably is, as anybody will tell you, is probably the final episode. I think partly because the book gave me much less material there. So it was. I knew that in the TV series we were going to go back to Egypt. That felt good. It felt like that gave us an emotional charge that would otherwise be missing. Because what I really hate as a writer is when you're kind of writing on empty, when you're just writing plot, and there's just you don't feel there's this awful feeling that there's nothing sitting underneath. and I always have warning signs flying around. And so I knew that with Egypt there'd be this just terrific emotional charge. This is where Sophie died. This is kind of why he did all this in the first place, and it's also where he might get caught because people know who he is. So you have jeopardy and you have emotional charge sitting behind it. But it still needed an unbearable amount of plot working out and machinations and trying to keep the suspense. And of course, quite rightly, everyone is way more on for episode 1 and episode 6 than any other episodes. The first and the last are absolutely key to the success of something, because the first one grabs everyone and the last one is the one everyone remembers. So you've got to get those two right. And the Susanne was all over it, making sure we got every suspense moment completely clear. And it was hard work. I mean, that is where you earn your crust and such. I think it's just really hard work, just going every moment, beat, making sure it's surprising but somehow inevitable, as the old phrase goes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So speaking of Susanne Bier, once she came aboard, did the script change much after that, or what was it like working with her?
Yeah, Susanne came on board after I'd written 5. And yes, absolutely, it changed. I mean, a director always changes everything. It's not like film. I mean, it belongs. That's why. I mean, TV is fantastic for a writer because you are respected in a way that you're not always in film, shall we say? But it was a collaborative experience. She also works very organically with actors, which is great. So the actors feel very involved and get their Pennyworth in as well. So yeah, no, I'd say she changed a lot. And of course, as I say, episode 6 was something that I wrote with her guiding it through as the director, and we had lots and lots of conversations about that. So it was a very much collaborative experience in that respect.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned before Hugh, Laurie, and Tom Hiddleston. I think that the heart and soul of this is sort of their cat and mouse game, you know. So talk about developing that over the course of the 6 episodes, and in particular writing those scenes between the two of them.
I mean, they're remarkable actors, and they have also loads of ideas themselves and will pitch stuff in. And so that's important to say that the game, from my point of view, was to keep and this was a bold thing that the producers really agreed to do, which was to keep Roper in abeyance in the first episode. I mean, in a way, having Hugh back on the television screens was, I think, quite exciting for everyone, but therefore to kind of offer not too much of him was, for me, a bold and important thing to do. I think Third Man is probably one of my favourite films, and you know, the fact that it takes forever to reach Orson Welles in that film is one of the great things about that film. We don't play it quite as boldly as that, but the fact that Roper is talked about, referred to, you glimpse him on television screens, but you don't get to know him for quite a while, is very important. And that then means that when those longer scenes on the island, it allows the audience want them. I think a lot of writing is actually about preparation for scenes as much as the scene themselves. If you want the scene, if you really want to watch it, if you feel that, oh, at last I desired this and now I'm being given it, it makes a huge difference to how you receive it. So that was my contribution, really, that sort of structural thing.
Mm-hmm. So it's amazing to see that this was made for television, you know, considering the scope and scale of it and the star power both in front of and behind the camera. Yeah, and the cinematic quality to it as well. I think it's a real indication of which direction television is going in. So any plans to continue working in it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I already know what my next television thing is. I ought to say, the direction, the sort of almost Hollywood direction of it, you know, Susanne has to take all the credit for that, incredible, and the producers for giving her the opportunity to do it. For my own work, I'm already working on an 8-part series which completely retells the story of Troy, the taking of Troy by the Greek armies, for BBC, and I hope get an American partner for that. Very confident we will, and that will film in February next year. So that's an 8-parter. Actually, it's a little bit longer than The Night Manager. I'm not writing all of them, but I'm writing 5 of them, the lion's share of them. So I'm leading that, and that's probably at the moment my biggest preoccupation, to be honest. It's quite, as you can imagine, quite a huge project, and we're trying to retell it from the Trojan point of view and do something that's political and radical and make it fresh, so it isn't too swords and sandals, if you know what I mean, and has a punch. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to that. Now, you also have a new film coming out this year that you wrote called HHHH. You want to tell us a little bit about that, what it's about, and what we can expect?
Sure. The book it's based on is fantastic. It's by a Frenchman called Laurent Binet, and it tells of the assassination of Reinhard Heydrich by two extraordinarily brave Czech revolutionaries in the Second World War in Prague. It's a fantastic story. And what was wonderful about the book, which I tried to emulate in the script, is you both get to know Heydrich as a man who was a terrifying but rather extraordinary individual. A lesser known Nazi perhaps than sort of Himmler and Goering and Goebbels, but right under Himmler, but actually the architect of the final solution and a very important and terrifying figure. But yeah, and then you also get to know these two absolute nobodies, these beautiful young guys who basically know they're sacrificing their lives to kill him. And it's a fantastic book. I haven't seen the film, can't tell you. Can't tell you about that. So I will find out with you how glorious the film is, but I certainly enjoyed my experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations again on your nomination. And it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you. All the best. Bye.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
And you.
Thank you.
Hit that button.